This analysis of documenting the American South, or Doc South, will examine the thrust and goals of the archive, areas where the archive is lacking, areas where the archive shines, and finally, what can be done to fix it. Documenting the American South is a digital archive sponsored and built by the University Library of UNC at Chapel Hill. Their aim is to collect and digitally publish texts, images, and audio files related to Southern history, literature, and culture. The conception of the archive was built on the goal of providing teachers, students, scholars, and the general public with access to a collection of historical documents on which to build their research. A dedicated editorial board oversees which documents are added to their collection, and those documents are being taken from other libraries and Southern historical societies. The thrust of the archive is to use Southern historical documents to elevate the voices of the marginalized people of the American South, though this mission statement isn't explicitly stated on their website. In fact, much of the information I presented about the archive came from external sources and are nowhere to be found on the Doc South website. Let's now turn our attention to some of the shortcomings and pitfalls of the archive. Documenting the American South set a goal to have the largest collection of Southern documents all assembled in one digital location, but they didn't establish the parameters for the documents they hoped to include in the project. Though it isn't explicitly stated anywhere on the Home or About pages, no documents after 1920 are included within the collection due to copyright complications. The database is a large collection of documents, but it is by no means comprehensive. Another pitfall of the archive is the fact that many of the documents included in the collection are difficult to come by, and the pages dedicated to each document aren't forthcoming with ways to access the primary resources. Some sources in the collection require special browsers and plugins for viewing, which was problematic at the conception of the website. Users are forced to view certain documents with SGML Browser's Multidoc Pro or an e-business plugin from a company called Panorama, but were not provided any information for how to install these browsers. Both plugins and related SGML browsers have been terminated, and the documents that required these elements have not been updated for use with modern browsers and plugins. We'll discuss these issues later when we get to fixing the archive, but I think we've beat up on the archive enough for now. Let's talk a little about the strengths of the archive. Doc South hosts thousands of documents from the pre-1920 era, many of which are first-person accounts of different periods in Southern history. In these documents, the pathos mode of persuasion is represented. Documents like first-person slave narratives and narratives on the subject of war appeal to readers' emotions. The persuasion of ethos is split between content and the actual archive. The aforementioned narratives are credible in the sense that they are accounts of life in that era from the perspective of individuals. The archive itself is credible as well. The only aim of the project is to assemble a collection of Southern historical documents. All of the items within the collection have been gleaned from other credible sources and libraries and must be submitted to an editorial board in charge of the archive for approval. The persuasion of logos is represented by the layout, navigation, and content of the archive. The layout is clean and well-spaced, though, as I previously mentioned, the website is dated. Documenting the American South is not an unsalvageable archive, and the editorial board at UNC at Chapel Hill is well on their way to building an impressive collection. The archive could benefit greatly from partnering with more public libraries and their databases, as well as allowing a central resource institution to take charge of the project. Doc South should also consider a broadening of their textual database, a review of all introductory texts to eliminate redundancies, and a commitment to make the database truly searchable via an SGML browser, preferably one that resides on the server and does not require users to locate their own. Lastly, the site could benefit from a website audit in which they consult a panel of users about the design and functionality of the archive. Users have long lamented about the unpleasantness of searching the database for materials, and though the editorial board made a commitment to improving user-friendliness in 2007, there is no evidence of changes being implemented in regard to the functionality of the website, and users still find the archive navigation unwieldy. Documenting the American South requires some tinkering, but it is by no means irredeemable. By updating their website's functionality and appearance, hosting their own SGML browser, clarifying their mission statement and the chronological parameters of the documents it hosts, and partnering with larger libraries and resource institutions, it could be an excellent resource for scholars and students alike. A revamp of the archive is almost as gargantuan as the archive itself, but it is both doable and necessary.